This is DrumWise Meets, and today I'm here with Jason Sutter. He's played with the likes of Cher, Marilyn Manson, Foreigner, and Smash Mouth. Hi, Jason.
How's it going?
So what age did you get into drums? And can you remember what your first drum set was?
I was probably, I first played a drum, like got into drums, like I wanted to drum. I was probably like 6, and I was given like a neighbor, a friend of my father who was a professor, another professor who's been a friend of the family's, gave them a drum that their son had used, and they got new drum heads on it. And I played it for a little bit, and then I ended up, breaking it and sticking in the closet, maybe around, and then, and so I've been actually hitting drums and had a drum since I was about 6, but I really didn't start like really starting to get into it until I was about 8, 9, and started taking like real drum lessons in band in school, as well as with private lessons, with a private teacher when I was about 8, 9. And my first drum set, I'll never forget. I was super lucky. And around that time, maybe around, 9, 10, my father found, I'm from a little town in upstate New York, and my dad found a 1965 Blue Sparkle Ludwig jazz kit. And I believe the story is pretty sad, but I believe it was a dude who went off to Vietnam and never came back. And the set was like, it was these people who owned a motel, and the set was in the attic, and they had put it in the attic once he never came home. And I got that kit, and it was a 2012-14 Blue Sparkle Keystone badge, just gorgeous, the nicest drum set I could own now. And that was my first kit. It had an acrylite 5-inch snare drum, and then it had terrible cymbals, but it had Ludwig hardware. And I was a huge Ludwig fan even then. That was when Ludwig ruled, and they had the catalogs, and our local music store, gave me a catalog, that famous 79 Ludwig catalog that had the Octopus and all the great graphics. So to have a Ludwig kit that, I was just so lucky, you know what I mean? And it was a used kit, and my dad got a great deal on it, but it was gorgeous. It looked like it was brand new. So yeah, that was my first drum set. Yeah.
An amazing first drum set to have. Wow.
Yeah. Incredible.
I'm a proper Ludwig nerd as well, so.
Yeah, for sure.
And what bands or artists inspired you when you first started playing?
I mean, when I was little, around that time, my dad gave me his stereo from his office. He's a professor. He was a sculptor, painter. So when he was working on his own art at night, he would have he has a great stereo setup, and he'd blast all kinds of jams. So he had he had kind of stepped up with his hi-fi, and he gave me this old Sony, had a tape player you could record on. I had real speakers, and I'll never forget, he gave me that. I got that home like literally a week before John Bonham died. And I grew up in upstate New York, so I had a great Canadian radio station called Shea 106, and it was like classic rock. And so I'd be around 78, 79, maybe. I guess I'd be 79, yeah. And so basically, I had a stack of blank tapes, and this machine would record. So, all this radio station would just play Led Zeppelin for like 2 weeks straight. So I literally recorded like every track that wasn't. So I literally had every bootleg Led Zeppelin track, and so that was hugely influential. I mean, before that, I know I had a tape of Dream Police, Cheap Trick, which had just come out. Bunny Carlos is, and again, these are all Ludwig dudes too. So I was in that deep back then, as far as like Ludwig, Bonham, Bunny. I think the Pink Floyd, The Wall had just come out. So same shit. I just recorded that. I had other recordings, but those, Cheap Trick was a huge influence when I was little. Obviously Led Zeppelin. I think the first record I ever got, my dad gave me, was Frankie Lyman and the Teenagers, which I recently bought on vinyl, which is dope as hell. Super cool record. And then Kiss, was like right behind that shit. And that was super huge for me. I fell right in that category. There are dudes who were too old and dudes who were too young. And I was right there, man. That shit just blew my mind open. And it was so much fun, whether you like Kiss or not, whether you think Peter Criss is a great drummer or not. It was an incredible time to be a young person and to be getting into music. And I don't know if any kid will ever have the elation that I had. Of course, it's biased, but I talked to other friends of mine, and it was just such an incredible experience, because it was like larger than life rock and roll, the drum set, the vibe, obviously the makeup. And so anyway, so yeah, that was really fun. That was a fun time to, to be into music. And I would say those bands probably are the ones that influenced me the most. The Cars first record came out around that time, and that was like super dope, super cool use of electronics and big drum sounds and simplicity, and yet there were a couple beats that turned around that were really fun. And so that shit, and I just got to say, like, all I listen to is that shit still. That's all I listen to. You could ask me about some new cool band. I think the last new band I was into was like Mars Volta, like 15 years ago. Like, with all due respect, like, I'm a vinyl nut, and honestly, if it's not on vinyl, I'm probably okay. You know what I mean? It's fun to get like buddies of mine from Nashville who put out a cool country record, or a country more like rock outlaw record. I got a couple of those that buddies of mine sent me, and that's fun. But for the most part, that's still the music I put on.
Yeah.
Not just rock, but jazz and classical, and I'm really into a bunch of different stuff. But if it's not on vinyl, I'm probably not listening to be 100% honest. And I don't mean to be like, closed-minded. I think there is great music out there, but anyway, the music that music I'm discussing, like, still is completely relevant to me, those records. The few times it's interesting to hear a lot of music. For me, like, even as far as like Guns N' Roses, in like 88, 89, I remember I was in college, and dudes would be like, dude, check out this band Guns N' Roses. And I was like, I'd listen to it, and everybody was losing their minds over this band. I listened to it, and I said, I don't need Guns N' Roses. I actually already have Guns N' Roses. They're called Aerosmith.
Yeah.
So I don't need that. Like, and I still don't get Guns N' Roses. I think it's great. God bless them. I know, and I've met a bunch of those dudes, and they're great. But honestly, like, to this day, man, I listen to it, and yeah, other than like, Sweet Child of Mine, or a couple of those tunes that are really, everything else just still to me just sounds like it's just an Aerosmith filter. Yeah. So I'm going to more likely, and when I talk about Aerosmith, I probably have 3 copies of every record, here, in another house somewhere else that I have a record player, and another, you know what I mean? It's like, that's that important to me. I'd rather buy 3 records of rocks, or draw the line, than 1 record, and then I'll go buy a bunch of other new stuff that probably is only going to last this long. Those records, I've been listening to them all my life, and they're still valid to me,
Absolutely. And actually, that links me quite nicely to my next question. So my next question is going to be, who's your all-time favorite drummer? But I think I should start by saying that I couldn't really answer that question, because we have so many different influences, don't we? So when you first started, you were influenced by drummers who, maybe roll on 10 years, you're influenced by someone else. So, but anyway.
Yeah, again, it's like, you can't pick one, but, if you had to, I mean, like, the same thing. It's like, you got those early guys, the dudes like Bunny Carlos, who taught you how to lay it down and stay out of the way and have your own vibe and make sure there's a sauce. Joey Kramer, I joke about Joey Kramer taught me how to play rock drums, by listening to those records. Obviously Bonham, if I had to pick one, it'd be Bonham, if you have to, for obvious reasons. But then there's Tony Williams, and there's Jack DeJohnette, and there's Art Taylor, and there's Jeff Hamilton, and there's all these great cats who are, beautiful jazz players. And I mean, there's Gary Malaber, the session cat, who ever since I was little, listening to like 2 Tickets to Paradise, Christmas with my mom when I was like 7, and going like, why does this sound so good? And then and realizing, holy shit, that's all the same dude. And he just kills it. It just rips out of the, and that guy lives like a few blocks from me, he's still kicking it in his 70s. you know, I see him play out in like cover bands. You know, I go to like the Grove and it's like this band's killing it. I'm like, that's Homeboy, that's Gary Malaber, you know. So there's so many cats. I don't think, and that's just a tiny, I mean, you know, Phil Collins drumming all through Brand X and that early Genesis just totally changed my idea of how to tune a drum. You know, it was loose, but it was tight, you know. So that's an impossible question, like you said, but hopefully some of those names pop out, and there's just so many more, you know. I mean, I've got probably like 5,000 records, and you'll forget, you'll put something on and go like, oh shit, I forgot about how great Billy Cobham is and those early, you know, records. Or, you know, you just, each one of those dudes, it's like, that's the fun of having all that massive catalog. I suppose it'd be like a kid who had Spotify or something, you know, like you just go through it and you just realize there's all these old friends that you grew up listening to, and something will influence you or inspire you. And then there's cats I got to play, like Matt Cameron, you know, I've got to play him, or Brad Wilk, or, you know, Dennis Elliott from Foreigner. Or I've learned so much from getting to play those songs, but I was a huge fan, and, you know, of those drummers before that, and to get to like emulate some of those grooves and, you know, and play those beats in their honor, you know, and same with, you know, Jerry Shirley from the New York Dolls when I did that tour, you know, like just cool, just to get to kind of walk in those footsteps of some of those guys, you know. Has been really, really cool playing in a lot of those different bands. So that's fun too, you know. It just keeps going, you know. Good. The influence.
Yeah, absolutely. It does. Yeah, totally. And just going on from what you just said there about having to emulate certain drummers. So when you first get a gig with a new artist, how do you learn the material? So do you just listen to the tracks? Do you listen and transcribe? Or, you know, are you given a big folder of all of the music and they go, here you go, Jason, here's the entire show transcribed for you? How's it worked for you?
Well, the latter, the transcribe, never happens, and never, ever. No one ever hands you anything and says, here. That never happens. But and then the second, I don't chart anything anymore. Years ago, I don't know, maybe 15 years ago, I said, you know what, man, I'm gonna work on my skills of just being able to learn things by rote, because I think that's a quicker way to do it. If it's, you know, and something like when I auditioned for, say, Chris Cornell, like, you know, good luck transcribing Spoon Man. Like, yeah. You know what I mean? Like, have fun with that. I mean, I got the call to audition for Chris at 6 o'clock, or I got a call about potentially being asked to maybe audition. And then by 8 o'clock, I was learning 6 tunes, and one of them was Spoon Man. You know, and so and then the audition was at 11 o'clock the next morning at 8 a.m. So I didn't have much time. I didn't have time to sit there and, like, you know. So luckily before that, I had been, you know, training myself to learn tunes, and I'll still do that now. I'm doing that now. I'm not working on independence. I'm not working on a clave. I'm working on learning songs. So I'll just pick a band that I dig, or that I might have been called to sub for, you know, or something that could be in the works, and I'll just take that and fall down the rabbit hole and learn that band like I would be learning them for a gig, like I would have learned the Foreigner show, you know. And that's how I do it. You know, it's an interesting process, because, like, say with Chris Cornell, when I did get the gig, he was about to go out and go on tour. He was about, you know, it was mid-swing. He hadn't found a drummer. I came in at the very end of like a month and a half of auditions. I was the last guy to come through the room by, you know, just to do a favor to a friend. That's a whole other story, and we could talk about it if you want. But I literally learned those 5 jams. We played them, and I barely knew. I was still sweating bullets with Spoon Man, you know, when we played it. And then basically for bands like that, for bands like Manson, where I got the gig literally when they were like already like, okay, we're going on the road in a month. So it was a matter of like learning so much material, like 30 songs. And 30 Manson songs is not easy because there's tracks. And then 30 Cornell tunes is like, you know, we're talking like crazy off a solo record. everything. Even the Carry On record had weird, crazy, and then take the Soundgarden shit, which is just like, I mean, Audio Slave for the most part was really just about feel and sauce and vibe, as far as technical part. So those were the kind of like, okay. But then, and with Cornell, we never stopped. But the point I'm making is when you're with Manson and Cornell, it was literally the process was go into rehearsal with 3 new tunes, play them with a band for a couple hours, then artist comes in, Manson, Cornell. Just those are 2 ways that gig worked, because they were, we were like moving towards a tour soon. And you'd learn those 3 songs, you'd play the 5 songs you learned yesterday with Cornell. And then he says, learn these 3 songs. And literally I go home, I review everything I've learned, and then I eat food and I lock myself in a room for 4 or 5 hours, learn 3 more tunes, not easy tunes, like what's a tune like that's insane? I mean, they're all insane. So many of those tunes are insane, but like Rusty Cage is like go learn Rusty Cage and be able to play it with Chris Cornell tomorrow. It's like, and oh yeah, and there are 2 more tunes, like Fell on Black Days and Like a Stone, So it's fun as hell, but it's exhausting. And you literally, like, your brain can't, you're just absorbing these songs. So by the end of the week, you have like 25 songs. And Cornell never stopped either. So, he literally once a week, generally on tour, or at least twice a month, he would throw out 2 more tunes, and we had to know those, So anyway, I'm getting off track, but there's different ways of having. Sometimes you have more time to learn. With Foreigner, I had to learn for Foreigner. I had to learn like 12 songs. That's like almost like half a set, And they picked what they wanted. Smash Mouth, I had to learn 9 songs, and that was a long time ago. And that was insane to me. I had a week to learn 9 songs. Normally you learn 3 tunes, So that's a lot to have to learn. But the nice thing was, once I learned it, they were like, "You're hired." With Smash Mouth, they're like, you really got me by, the Van Halen version. And how about Little Dreamer, or I don't know, one of the other Van Halen hits. And so I was like, yeah, they were like, let's jam. We jammed on those. They're like, great, we got 11 songs. You need to learn 5 more. We got a gig next week. You're hired, So at least I already had some of the music ready by the time I had a gig a week later, So right. It's maddening, but I don't chart anything, almost nothing. And the Cher show, I had about 2.5 months to learn that book. And that book is the hardest book of Cornell and Manson combined. You know what I mean? Like, that is the hardest shit I've ever had to learn. The nuances, the dynamic. And so I had 2 months to learn that. And I went out with Dee Snider. I agreed to do a summer run with Dee Snider. And he ended up picking up like a whole nother month of touring because a band bailed. And so we picked up all their slots, opening for Aerosmith at Hellfest, and, in France, and the famous Belgian Metal Fest. I can't remember what I played with Cornell too. So they added all these dates. So all of a sudden, the 2 months I had to learn all this Cher shit, which I was already sweating, was now all of a sudden I'm in Europe for another month. They're like, sorry, dude. And I can't learn these beats because they're like all these fills and, concert tom parts. So it wasn't like something like Back in Black you could learn on a pillow in your hotel room. It was and I had all these electronics. It was muscle memory type shit, So that was scary. That was a lot. That freaked me out. But, I like to be very prepared, So that's how I am,
Laugh. And actually, talking about different artists like that. So I've written this question to specifically ask you, because I think that you're a great person to ask about this, for especially for our students that will watch this. I imagine that playing the Cher and Marilyn Manson gigs, that they're 2 very different shows. So how do you prepare for such different styles? And like, do you have to get into a different mindset before the show? Because I imagine you have to play like super hard for the Marilyn Manson stuff.
I went to college. I studied, marimba. I played timpani in orchestras. I was in a drum line, like not just a little bit. Like, I played timpani. I played marimba. I played drum line with, and this is like with the real symphony and with the best drum lines and with all those things I immersed myself into, because I believe that the more you diversify, the more, well, obviously diversified you are, and then you can apply that to any situation. So I tried to, and I talk about this a lot in clinics, I tried to get out of my comfort zone, right? So I put myself in positions I should never have put myself in at a young age. And luckily at University of North Texas, it was all about like being a rounded musician and percussionist. So that was applauded, even though it was like, it was terrifying on a daily basis, getting up and playing a Baroque, a Bach, piece, a cello concerto on marimba, a cello suite on marimba in front of 200 drummers. It was terrifying, but the more I did that, the more it made it easy for me to adapt and be able to just move. And it's like, I'm playing marimba now. Great. That's a whole different stroke, a different touch, a different mindset, a different volume. Now I'm playing timpani. That's a whole different thing. So I applied that to same with drums, and then it's a matter of having a look that you can look like cool for Cher, or that doesn't matter, but you can work for Manson, and then something that you can mold. Because I also joke in a way as a session drummer, to the extent that I try to do it with these different gigs, which is the fun part for me. It's almost like you're like a character actor, and you have to be able to speak that language of the accent and convince the listener that you are that dude. You know what I mean? And I'm not just convincing the listener. I'm convincing Twiggy Ramirez, who wrote these songs, who knows he's like a living Rolodex of metal songs. You could play 1-2 bars of a riff and he'll play the rest of it. Doesn't matter who it is. If they were around in the 80s, he knows them. He's a student of that. So for me, I'm also convincing him that I know how to play heavy metal and double bass, and right. And he, my goal is for him to never look back and go like, yeah, that's not cutting it. Or yeah, maybe go back to the drawing board. Never once did he turn around and wasn't buying it. And that to me is the ultimate goal, because the audience is discerning. But when you're dealing with these musicians who have dedicated their lives to a certain art form, and you're suddenly coming into that art form, it's like working with a British actor as an American, and you're all supposed to be British 1600s, yeah. Right? Like, so the actor isn't going like, dude, that Cockney is shit. You know what I mean? Like, where you're convincing them that you're, you know what I mean? Mm. So that's my goal, is to be able to those nuances. And then once you kind of are able to constantly at a young age force yourself to fall on your face and get out of your comfort zone, then there is no comfort zone anymore. And there is no non-comfort zone anymore. So I don't care if it's Cher and after Manson, each one of these gigs, it's like getting a master's degree in metal. If you do it, if you give a shit enough and you spend enough time. So for me, I would never in a million years, I had been practicing a lot of double bass before Manson. Okay. But if I hadn't been practicing that, I wouldn't have been able to adapt to that. So there is a certain physicality. You have to be prepared a bit for everything. And most people don't want to spend that much time doing it, And honestly, to be 100% honest, if I only had one gig, one band, even if it was a cool ass band, I don't want to say a band and then sound like I'm talking down on, but a giant band, I would be unhappy as a drummer. That's not what I set out to do. It's never. I always had 5 bands in high school. I want to be able to use those things. I want to be able to wear that hat and wear this hat for this gig. I wouldn't want to just come in and be like, I'm in Lincoln Park and that's what I do. Yeah. That would not have been, that's not a satisfying career for me. So to get to play with Cher and to get to play with Manson, to get to play with Dee Snider right before, I literally finished a gig with Dee Snider in Germany and flew to Vegas to play with Cher to start, It was like Kenny Aronoff shit, you know what I mean? And that was satisfying, to be playing with Dee Snider, who I respect as a musician and as a person. And then all of a sudden I'm playing with this, these two kind of living legends in different worlds, and they're both valid. And I care about playing their music just as well, I'm a Twisted Sister fan, but I'm a huge Cher fan, you know what I mean? So that's different about whether, but luckily I've been able to play with every band I've played with I like too, and not a lot of drummers can say that. I have some friends whose whole career is built on playing with artists they would never listen to,
Yeah.
So I've been really lucky in that sense. Maybe you could say maybe I manifested that, but I have a jukebox right behind me here, And I thought, wouldn't it be funny to put in a single of every band I've played with? And I found a single from every band, and it's actually really fun because I still like all those bands. They're great records. They're produced well, played well. I maybe hope I never see that lead singer or that guitarist ever again, or that tour manager, but doesn't mean I don't respect the music still. So I'm really lucky on so many levels. But to be clear, it really comes down to doing the work, being as diverse of a player as you can. If, I learned how to learn, I learned how to learn. And what I mean by that is I took my process of studying the instrument of marimba, and I applied that to studying timpani. And then I applied that to studying the dedication and how my brain works and the repetition, which is usually for me. And then I applied that to drum set playing and then becoming freelance artist. So all those experiences as a young student, the more you branch out, the more you say yes to every gig, the more you put yourself in a position where you're pissing your pants, then you're getting somewhere. And if you leave and you just feel like it's good to fall on your face, especially while you're younger. It's good to listen back and go, I suck. Because eventually, if you keep doing it, and I'll be the first to say, only in the last 10 years or so, I listen to recordings now and I go like, I like that drummer. I like that guy. I like how he's playing. I dig his style. And it's me, and I can say that at my age at this point in my career, but it takes a long time. Like college, it was awful, so it's important to push yourself, I think. And that is how I'm able to kind of, I think, do those gigs. And I relish that,
And just on that theme there, with the two different shows, I imagine you have to, dress quite differently and also have a different stage presence for each show.
Absolutely. I mean, with Cher, we're on the stage with her and we're lit. We're part of the show. We have to wear black. That's it. That's all we're told. I wear a hat, usually keeps the hair out of my face. But we're on the stage. It's important. But, she's the focus. You know what I mean? But somebody like, say Smash Mouth, I'd wear like something like what I'm wearing right now. I wouldn't be wearing this with Manson, like a cut off snakeskin shirt and some, whatever. I'd probably wear that if I was playing with, and I wore this with Joe Perry, and Brad Whitford when I did that tour, the Joe Perry project, playing Aerosmith tunes. Manson was obviously totally different. And, that's a whole other side of it. And you go like, well, how do I look when I go into audition for Marilyn Manson? You got to have a look, and, I threw, it was hard enough to get the audition. A lot of people don't realize, like, they think, I knew him before. I never met him. I got a call like at 3 p.m. to audition for him at like 8 o'clock. And I had to bring a whole drum set down. And I had to relearn all these songs because he wanted me to play to an iPod. There was no internet there. I had learned all live versions, which are shorter. So I had to go back and relearn the iPod, the recording versions, which in some cases are longer or shorter. And I ran home and I was like, what do I wear? I threw on some like black boots. I threw on black jeans. I threw on a black V-neck shirt. And I ran in with him and on audition, and he made some comment. Twiggy was wearing a black V-neck shirt. And Manson had a black V-neck shirt on. And he was like, oh, he's got the black V-neck too. That's so cool. Never in a million years would I have imagined that a black V-neck would bond me to a look with Manson, right? So you can only just kind of, that was just dumb luck. I used to joke when I was auditioning back in the early 2000s, when I auditioned for Smash Mouth and a million other bands, like I would say to young people moving here, buy a pair of black Converse, like Chuck Taylor's, because those are like a great common denominator. They make you look young, they make you look hip. They work for every style, from punk to metal to, I said, don't, that way you got one part of your gear that, is neutral, if that makes sense. I can't play in those shoes and I don't wear them anymore, but I just, that to me, that was something I said to like younger guys who just moved to town who had no idea what they were doing. I joke, an audition is just a musician's job interview, but it's like a blind date. It's like, you show up and, they've never seen you before and you've never seen them before. You know, it's like you walk into the bar, you're like, are you, you know, they're like, are you the drummer? You know, like, and, you know, I say in auditions, like breaking the ice is essential, but the minute you walk in, a third of your interview is being conducted, a third of your audition is being conducted. It's how you walk in that room, how you set up your drums if they're hanging out, how you carry yourself, and what you're wearing. And that's that's part of it. And it may be, you know, something as simple as a V-neck, or it might be, you know, you got a green mohawk. I don't know, you know, but luckily I think there are some dudes who have an extreme look, you know, whether it be facial hair or, you know, a crazy hairdo or something. I tend to have something somewhere in the middle, you know what I mean? And so I can blend it, you know? But as far as with the Cher and Manson thing, those are very different. And, you know, the Manson thing at first I thought, oh, I have to have all black cymbals. He wanted a black special, you know, kit. He wanted everything black. And then I realized at the end of the day, he really was just, you know, I had the dopest looking kit and black cymbals and killer outfit made by this great designer, and basically we were all in the dark except for him. So none of it fucking mattered at all. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
None of it mattered. It was just like all he wanted was everybody to just see him. That's great.
I was going to ask you actually about your black kit for the Manson gig. Was that a requirement? Was it like you have to have?
Absolutely. No, I met with him and he showed me this color he had in mind. You know, he had this whole vibe in mind for this kit that he wanted me to use. And he had me come meet with him at his house. And he had clips of different like cars. It was when cars were, this is 2012. It was when, you know, there was a lot of like the murdered cars, you know, that paint job where it's like, you know, flat black, you know, like hot rods.
Yeah.
He wanted a drum set with a flat black hot rod look. Now those are everywhere now. There was not one of those kits out there back then. You know, I mean, Ludwig made a kit called a Black Panther back in the 70s. You know, it was a flat finish. It was dope. Still is dope. It was a limited finish that didn't catch on at all. You can find those kits for cheap. But that was a vibe. And I actually looked at a couple Black Panther kits, you know, for him. But it's funny. It came down to I ended up having a kit made by Ron Donette of steel. And it was steel, very heavy steel, like the Bonham kits that he would make. And they were a gunmetal, so they weren't stainless polished like a Bonham. They were. I don't know how to describe it. They weren't shiny. They were a raw gunmetal, blued steel, and then they were allowed to. They weren't coated, so they would rust in parts. So it had this cool look. But I decided I really loved that flat. It was kind of a flat black, like a gun barrel, you know, like a cannon. And so I decided I love these things. And I called Ron. I said, I don't want these to rust. I love this color. He said, just rub it with this light oil, some oil, and they'll never rust. And they won't be oily. It'll just seal them. And so I did that just because I love the look. And I set that kit up. A kit was coming. I literally had to put it together. I ordered it from Ron. He literally made the shells for me, you know, like you would a stainless Bonham reissue. I get the drums in rehearsal. I put the lugs on. I mean, I'm literally putting the badges on these drums, like, you know, from Ludwig, from Donette, you know. And I order a Ludwig kit, a Legacy custom 26-inch by 14 bass drum, custom rack, all blue olive badges. I find this rare, Ludwig finds a rare company that has a flat black finish. So we have that kit being made. Ron's making me this stainless kit, this gunmetal, one of a kind. And then I have a kit coming. My Manson suggests, because again, we're under the 8 ball of time. We're behind the 8 ball. He says, why don't you just spray paint that drum set you've been using with Foreigner? Because I got my cases shipped to the rehearsal. I open them up and there's the 26 by 14. I think it's like a 13 or a 14 rack, and then a 16-18 silver sparkle. I've used with literally, I got the kit for Smash Mouth. I used it with Smash Mouth. I used it with Smash Mouth. I used it for Rock of Ages, the musical, opening night, you know, the whole run in LA where it was written. I used it for Smash Mouth. I used it for Foreigner. And before that, I used it for Cornell. So I've used that kit for like 5 bands, right? And it's silver sparkle, Keystone badge, you know, made probably in 2006. And all over the fucking world. And when I get it, finally, I pull out of the cases and light, and every drum is a different green of, you know, how silver sparkle old drums can change colors. They fade differently. This whole kit had faded into this weird, like, one looked green almost. One time. The bass drum looked like mint, and the floor toms were like, or, you know, it was like, one of the drums was like, looked perfect. Maybe it was the rack tom, was fine. But every other drum looked totally different colors. So I was like, fuck it. And he was like, why don't you spray paint this kit? And just spray paint it black, the whole thing, lugs and everything. You know, that's Manson. I'm like, I ain't doing that. This kit's been everywhere. I've, you know, this nostalgic. Yeah. Anyway, I get the Dunette kit, put it together. And in rehearsals now, you know, these are rushed kits to get to me. I had been using a New York Dolls kit, a Ludwig special kit. It's in the 2011 catalog. It was made to look like a Cozy Powell kit. It was the mock lugs that I brought back to Ludwig. And yes, I'll take credit for that. And they'll give it to me, I'm sure. So I brought those lugs back. I said, why don't you have mock lugs? Why don't you offer blue olive badges only on the Vista lights? And you make mock lugs, but you won't, they discourage it. And I said, no, I want that Cozy Powell, Bonham, Ian Pace. So those guys all had those mock lug kits, and they sounded great, and they looked sexy as hell. So I said, I want mock lugs. So these kits were, you know, mock lug kits too. They were dope. Anyway, that kit was the first mock lug kit offered in the catalog, and it was a red sparkle, and it still had the New York Dolls head on because I had to bring a drum set down. And so I literally had just finished with the New York Dolls. So I brought it down and used that. And Manson, you know, maybe about a week into it, we have all this craft services, food. He starts like taking, like, there was like sugar for coffee, and he just starts like pouring it on like the toms and the cymbals. So when I hit it in rehearsals, it would like, shit would go everywhere, you know? And then there was like, you know, and then somehow he got a hold of like flour, you know? So he poured flour. So, you know, I could basically make like a fucking cookie. I could bake like some bread after the show, you know, after the rehearsal, just because he was bored and he would just love to see it like go everywhere. Yeah. So I'm realizing as I set up this beautiful kit, and Manson would rarely come to rehearsals. We'd be there for 8 hours. He'd come for like an hour, talk on his phone, play through 2 songs. That's a day of rehearsals with Manson, you know? So, and then many days he wouldn't come at all. And I set this beautiful black Dunette Ludwig steel kit up, and I'm looking at it and I play it, and it's so gorgeous. And it sounds better than any drum set I've ever played in my life. And I realized, like, we take a break and I'm praying he's not going to come in, because I realize he's going to destroy these drums. He's going to, you know, I'm not going to have him put sugar and shit on them, you know? So I literally packed them up immediately and brought them home and never, ever brought them back out again. And the drums that came from Ludwig, the beautiful, one of a kind, black lugs made, black blue olive badge, that kit never came out of the boxes. Never came out of the boxes. And I spray painted that silver kit. And it's even cooler is Tony, the manager for Manson, who's awesome, was like, how much is that kit? And I was like, well, I got it for free. He's like, yeah, but if you had it destroyed and had to get a new one, how much would it be? I said, I don't know, like $5,000. And he wrote out a check for $5,000 and he gave it to me. And he said, one day you're going to need to buy a new kit on this tour. So we're even. Cool? Cool. That's how he rolled. And I eventually figured it out. You know, Manson would go through. I called Ludwig and I got about 4 26 by 14 bass drums in all different colors, because it didn't matter, because we just spray painted. Yeah. And honestly, I ended up selling that kit to the Hard Rock Cafe with black Paiste cymbals, the whole kit. So somewhere it'll end up somewhere, hopefully. I think my boots are in like the Lyon Hard Rock Cafe from that tour, which is funny. But the point is they actually look dope as hell spray painting them. And I could replace rack toms because he'd pull them down and they just get smashed. He'd smash the bass drums with mic stands and like go right through the bass drum, you know? But honestly, to Ludwig's, you know, to give Ludwig props, those drums still sounded great with chunks out of them, you know? So anyway, that's what ended up happening with that kit. And I still have the steel kit. I ended up selling to a student, a great drummer, I'm not going to mention, but he's also, you know, an up and coming killer drummer. I sold that kit to him because he just begged me for it. And I was like, fine, you can have it. You know, it's a one of a kind Ludwig. I'd rather you be playing it. I don't know what I'm ever going to do with it. You know, I've already sold one kit to Hard Rock. And I've kept that steel kit, which is one of the best sounding drum sets I will ever play in my life. It is like playing timpani. So thanks, Ron and Ludwig. And it's also dope as hell. It's the only black gunmetal steel Ludwig kit ever. Yeah.
Now, just moving away from drums for a minute, my first curveball question. What are your hobbies away from drums?
I have lots of shit I like to do. I'm older. I've been playing drums. I mean, my resume, I've gotten to play with a ton of great bands, dude. This dude right here has, I've lived my dreams 10 times over. I've had 3 careers as far as what I would, you draw a line for yourself throughout my life saying, if I could have this, if I could do that. And the best part about it is, like I said, playing with great diverse bands, playing with great musicians, making great music, and going everywhere in the world to do it 5, 10 times. You know what I mean? Like places I never thought I would get to go and play music and meet people from those places and enjoy that culture. So that said, my cup is full. And in a moment like this, I feel for the younger players who, when everything's on hold in our industry, which is already a very questionable, shrinking industry. I'm not doom and gloom. There's still hope, but it's smaller than it was, last week, and it's going to get smaller every day. There's still a lot of great playing opportunities. That said, I've done the playing thing, so I love drums. It's my life, but I love tons of other stuff. You know what I mean? And that's, I think, inspires me. I didn't play drums for the first 2 months after, but I was literally on the road with Cher. So I enjoy a lot of other things. I have a real estate license. I sell houses to musicians for fun because a lot of musicians don't know what it takes to buy a house, and they can make even yesterday I was on the phone for 2 hours and with buddies in Nashville, and I'm in LA. I don't have a license in Nashville, but I'm constantly, if I can, giving people advice to help them buy a house, whether I'm getting a commission. I don't do it for a commission. It's fun for me, but I've had a real estate license since 2004, and I just bought a home, and my mother had just bought a home, and I was renting it for her. And so I thought that'd be interesting. So I'm fascinated with homes, architecture, design, from renovations. I've renovated probably 4 houses myself. When I say renovate, that could mean the whole house, or it could mean part of a house, and I've played contractor, getting people to do it. Stuff like that's very interesting to me. It's maddening, but I think the drum mind, and after having a career in music, I feel like you can do anything. So that's fun for me. Helping people, helping other people get homes, something they can have for the rest of their life. And as a musician, that stability is essential in this day and age. If you live in a city, you need that. That's a whole nother clinic, or discussion. But so I love the idea of homes. I have 5 of them, 2 in Joshua Tree, 2 in Nashville. One's a triplex, 3 units in that house. And then this is my home in Los Angeles in North Hollywood. And I love it. And I play landlord. I rent the Nashville homes out, 3 of them as Airbnbs. And then Joshua Tree, I'm renovating those 2 homes in the Mojave Desert, which is becoming very, very popular. You'll probably hear more of it. It's right where Coachella happens, the music festival. So that is, that's fun for me. Things like that. That's what I spend my money on. My money goes from Cher to a house in Joshua Tree that, was a little shack on 5 acres with mountain views in the desert. And now I'm going to turn that into a really groovy mid-century little home, little cabin to rent out for people and for me to be able to go enjoy when I'm home. It's about 2 hours from LA. I collect art. I'm an art collector. I help people collect art. This is a Basquiat behind me. That's kind of cool. This is a Andy Warhol cow from 1963. This is an electric chair from 71. I don't know if you can see any of these, but that's a sculpture my father made, So, I'm into art and design and fine art. When I'm on the road, I try to, check out museums and get into that. And, I like art history. That's something I'm fascinated by. I'm super into like the native culture, and I've read every book, and I try to be, versed in that. It's I'm in the West, and that's kind of an amazing place to be. And, you can get in your car and drive and, be in a pretty, pretty amazing cultural spot. You know what I mean? I just can drive in a direction and where, some major, American Indian either war or, event happened, so that's fascinating to me. Hence the Buffalo here, but, so I'm into a lot of different things, I love mid-century furniture. I collect antiques, I don't really collect drums anymore. I have a couple snare drums that I use. That's it. I have a couple drum sets I use. That's it. There's no nostalgia for me with those drum sets anymore. I'm fine with like letting it go. But I love antiques, and so, there's a lot of things that interest me outside of music. And honestly, like, if I had another career, I'd love to be like an art dealer, and help people fill their homes with art, or buy one beautiful piece that they could pass on to their, throughout their family, for generations. I love that. And I grew up in galleries because my father is a sculptor, and, that's a big deal for me. And I think that makes me I think the more well-rounded you are in that, the better player you'll be too,
Yeah.
So yeah, so I'm into a lot of stuff, drumming now is still the top, but I've quenched that thirst, and I've done that. And I don't mean it in like in any other way than to say you're looking at a dude who's very satisfied with his musical career in a career that is very hard to be, I don't know, to thrive in. It's a difficult career. And so I can say, to younger people, man, put in the time and, keep, because you can do it, and I'm amazed that coming from where I came from, I was able to do it. So that is a thirst that is quenched, and there's a million other things out there that I wake up and I can't wait to get into.
And while we're not talking about drums, my big curveball question for you: what's your favorite cookie?
That's tough, man. I had a friend of mine. She made these great coconut. I forget the name, what you call it. It's like a type of cookie that's damn good, I gotta say, with chocolate chips in it. But I guess if I had to pick like a cookie, I'd probably be just like a basic American like chocolate chip cookie dude. I think if I had to like go with that,
Cool.
Sorry if that's not that exciting of an answer. I cook too, man. I cook like crazy. I'm like a super into cooking. I have like a really nice stove. It gets used all the time. Pre-COVID, I love coming home and cooking. I love going out in the world and traveling and eat. I'll eat great food wherever I am. I always go to like the local, crazy place in Australia and Sydney where you can only get this kind of like bay bug that only grows, in the water, there, some amazing seafood thing, so I'm all about like that as well, just a side note. But I love cooking and I love baking, and I'm getting, so that's something I'm into. So unlike a lot of friends of mine who are like, oh shit, there are no restaurants open, I'm gonna die. For me, I'm actually able to kind of, that's enjoy that cooking part.
Absolutely, yeah. I love cooking as well, so I'm with you there. And with the cookie, the side note to that question is: would you dunk the cookie in milk?
I'm not a dunker. I'm not. But I have done, in speaking of Australia, they have these cookies. They're called the Tim Tam or a Tam Tam, and they're like these little like chocolate cookies. And they have a thing there called the Tim Tam Slam. And the coffee in Australia is probably the best coffee in the world. I can just say, from touring everywhere and trying coffee everywhere, I can honestly say I think the best coffee in the world is like New Zealand, Auckland, or Sydney. I've narrowed it down to like, or Australia in general. Just can't touch it. And so basically you take a coffee and you take the cookie and you stick the cookie, you bite off at each end and you stick the cookie in. It's like a chocolate covered, like long cookie, famous Australian cookie. And you suck the coffee through the cookie, and then you smash the cookie in your mouth while it's filled with coffee, because it's just totally like, it just melts in your face. And that's called a Tim Tam Slam. So that's the last time I dunked a cookie, because the bass player with Cher, Ashley, is married to an Australian drummer, Chris Reeve. And so they're they're hip to the Tim Tam Slam. So I can say I did the Tim Tam Slam. Was the last time I dunked a cookie, last time we were in Australia.
Well, that sounds amazing. So my last question, if you could give just one bit of advice to up and coming drummers, what would that be?
I mean, again, that's really loaded. Hopefully we covered a couple of those things, you know, the basic things about diversifying. I mean, it really comes down to diversifying as a player and being able to adapt. And like I said, getting out of your comfort zone, you know, practice playing with people who are better than you are. Practice stretching, playing styles of music that maybe, you know, are not up your normal. Don't practice just things that you're good at. Practice things that push you, you know. Those are big bullet points I think have worked for me. You got to put in the time, you know what I mean? You got to practice, you gotta, you really do. It's a craft and you have to master it, you know? And so don't be afraid to, you know, lock yourself in your room and have fun with it. Make sure you apply it too, you know? I found the best I ever got was having practiced while I was in college, and I started getting these great gigs in Dallas. I was in, you know, North Texas area. And I started getting these great gigs in Dallas, and I would go play on the weekends, play these cover like fusion jazz gigs back when there were fusion jazz gigs in bars in Dallas during, you know, lunch and brunch and breakfast. Anyway, it was a different time. But anyway, I felt like I grew the most because I was practicing, but I'd go play, I'd record myself, I'd listen to myself on a hour ride back to Dallas. And then I would just practice, like applying all the things that I felt like I needed to work on from listening to myself. You know what I mean? So to me, you'll figure out you will learn how to learn. And I learned how to learn through this process. So I'm kind of circling back here, these main big points for what worked for me, you know? The other thing is, you know, you gotta stay positive, you know, as a young player or as a mature player. It's an up and down business. It's, you know, I find the podcasts I do where I talk about gigs that I lost, either I was fired or the old drummer came back. Those stories you tell people, it's gonna happen. I think those are great learning lessons because it helps young players realize, oh, wait, you're able to have a great career, but you lost gigs along the way. It wasn't all easy, you know? That's a real important thing for younger players to remember, man. This wasn't a walk in the park. My big other point is eat your vegetables, you can have dessert, okay? That's my like mantra of this, you know, the more you eat your vegetables, the more you can have dessert. And that's really a basic way. You shed, you practice, you do it, you know, you try to seek education from great players, great teachers, and then you try to apply that and you try to, you know, and then if you're lucky enough to put enough time into it and you're successful with that, you reach your goals of playing great music with great people, then you get to be in the position where I'm at now, where I can sit back and go like, yeah, if I get a gig, great. If I don't get a gig, great. It's gravy, you know, some people call it gravy. It's like, I ate my vegetables, man. I ate more vegetables than I could ever imagine. And now I have dessert because you can't take that away from me. You know what I mean? The satisfaction in my heart and my soul, my hands and my feet, because I can play shit and go like, I can't believe I can play this shit now, you know? There will come a point where it will all start to make sense if you really dedicate yourself to the craft, to the instrument. And then it should be fun, you know? And so I think those are a lot of points. It's not one little thing. Obviously, I've covered like 20 things. But I think for younger players, you know, some of you will be able to grab at certain things. But I feel like get out of your comfort zone, eat your vegetables, you can have dessert, you know, those big ideas just keep coming back around. I think those are easy ways to say it. But I can say, if I can do it, you can do it. You know, I grew up in the middle of the woods in upstate New York. I was lucky to have a great couple drum teachers, and I was lucky to be in a college town where there were a lot of bars. I was playing at a very young age. Play music. That's the other thing. For really young players, I would say there are so many young players who get distracted because you're trying to play for likes. You're trying to play for followers. You're trying to play for you know, almost like gymnastics. Like you're trying to like do this crazy, you know, it's almost like it's like cage fighting with drumming where dudes are trying to outshop each other, which is just like so not the point. why I got into music. I got into music because I loved playing music for people, entertaining people. So to me, remember that that's why you're doing it. A lot of young players, I know some guys are like, I'm not going to haul my drums through some kitchen to play some shitty gig for $50 in LA. I'm like, dude, you're like 25. That's called paying dues. I've been doing that since I was a little, and I do it now. If I'm home and I get called for a gig, I don't care how much it pays. I've never played a gig for money in my life. The last question I ever asked, how much does it pay? Never do I ask that, ever. And the money always is secondary. And I'm not saying like I've got like, you know, a halo and I'm pure, like, no, you know, I love it, but it's the last thing on my mind. Is it a cool gig? Can I afford to do it? In other words, can I at least, you know, pay my bills? I don't need to get tons of money. I need to get just enough so I can save a little, invest that so I have a retirement. But other than that, man, I don't play gigs. I don't take any gigs based on money, you know? The New York Dolls paid nothing. And I paid to fly to New York to put myself up. And I paid for all my food in New York for rehearsals for 2 weeks. And I made sure when they were looking at drummers, a buddy had put my name in it. I called and said, listen, I'm from New York. I'm not an LA guy, even though my nickname was Hollywood the whole time, which I'm fine with. But I knew that I didn't want them to hire somebody else because they knew that they lived in New York and they didn't have to pay for them during rehearsals or food. I said, I'll fly myself there. I'll pay for it. And I made nothing. I made pennies, but it was one of the coolest experiences, best gigs I've ever done. He opened for Motley Crue and Poison for a US tour for 3 months. And then we opened for Alice Cooper. It was an Alice Cooper tour in England, you know, for a Halloween run that started in Birmingham and ended in, you know, we did London for a bunch of shows and we ended in Scotland on Halloween. It was like the coolest gigs ever, you know what I mean? So, and I love those guys to this day. It was like rock school for me. I learned so much and I got to play with one of my favorite bands in the world. So I don't care what I'm making for that gig. So again, younger players, it's easy to kind of forget the plot. The plot for me was playing music because I loved it. And I know that I love watching people playing music for people. That's my job. And if you forget that, then it's just going to suck. If you're just doing it for pay, for notoriety, for likes, or, you know, friends on, you know, Instagram, you're going to be really unhappy with this career. If you're doing it because you love playing music for people as an entertainer, then you'll always be able to land on your feet and be a successful musician, you know? So those are things, it's more philosophical, but I'm just saying as an older dude, I can say, I look at a lot of young guys and they're so angry and competitive and pissed at the industry. And it's like, and then I thought about it and it's like, that's why they're angry. They're not doing it for the right reasons. It's not what's in their heart. And that's if you're not doing it for that, man, it's going to suck. So do it for the right reasons. Be nice to people. You know, it can be a really shitty business sometimes. And that's one thing I've learned is, man, when I meet the opening act in Ireland, in some little part of Belfast, you know, I go up to that drummer and if he sounds good, I go up to him and introduce myself to him and say, hey, have a great show. You know, that's what you do, you know? I think it's important to be cool to people, you know, and because who knows what that kid's about. And that might be, I've had dudes do that with me, and that kind of shit helps you keep going. You know what I mean? So remember that when you're on the road. It's the dudes in those positions that need more of a reinforcement, not I'm too cool for school, fuck you, opening band, close the door, you know? And I've had plenty of bands do that, and I know what not to do, you know? So be cool too.
Well, Jason, thanks so much for giving up your time to do this interview with us here at DrumWise. It's been a pleasure talking with you.
Wonderful. Thank you, man. And keep drumming. Stay safe.